So you've come to the right place. If you're here to talk about digital disruption in Slack, welcome. My name is Samantha Becker, and I'm presenting today with Warwick Pond, our top 10 lessons learned from ASU's digital campus. There's a link there at the bottom, very much on purpose, if you'd like to learn more and even get more context about this presentation. There's a link to do so. I would love to kick it over to my co-host today, Warwick Pond, to introduce himself.
Yeah, so Warwick Pond with Arizona State University. I'm in the Strategic Implementation Office. I have the pleasure of managing some project managers and QA specialists and some administrators over Jira. And we implement new and exciting enterprise projects, and Slack just being one of them.
Thank you, Warwick. And I'm Samantha Becker. In addition to being the campgrounds keeper at Learning Human and the community director for Shaping EDU, I also have a day job, and I'm the executive director of creative and communications at the UTO, and I get to hang out in Slack all day with cool people like Warwick. A little bit of context, because I did tell you my day job was basically as a spokesperson for ASU. So I just got to share a little bit about where we're coming from. Just to set some context for digital disruption, our use of Slack at ASU is not by accident. Obviously, over the past 10, 12 or so years, strategic time with Michael Crow getting here, we started really doubling down on innovation efforts and inclusion efforts. We're innovative in our zest and our drive for including anyone and everyone possible. And that is very much the foundation of our charter, and pretty much the foundation of any technology strategy or tool or approach that we adopt for the university as the University Technology Office in collaboration with our community. A little bit about us, because we're going to be breaking it down into some Slack stats. Actually, I should be updating this because I'm really excited. We're returning to campus this next month. And so on-campus students will be welcome back, but we now have 3 modalities of learning. So we have ASU Sync, we have full campus immersion, and we have ASU Online. And there are over 38,000 ASU online students, and our retention rate is pretty awesome, I would say. Warwick and I are coming to you from the University Technology Office within ASU. And so our mission is to serve the ASU community and to help make that, to help bring that ASU charter to life and really enable and catalyze ASU's mission to be the new American university in service to all learners, no matter where in the world and who in the world they are.
So just some fast facts about Slack at ASU. We are just shy of 16,000 users. That continues to grow. Those are active users utilizing the Slack enterprise. There's 2,700 active course workspaces, and we'll talk more about how a course workspace is created. And there's 376 integrated apps. If you're familiar with Slack, you know it's not just an instant messaging platform. It changes how people work, and that is kind of the crux of our presentation today, of how did we ensure and what did we learn in trying to get user adoption via Slack and getting people to understand what it really is.
So before we dive in here with some of our top lessons learned, I want to ask a quick question. In the chat, on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being the newbiest of new Slack users, and 5 being super advanced, building and integrating your own apps, how would you rate yourself? 1 through 5 in the chat. Okay. Ooh. In succession, I'm seeing all over the place. Okay, I wouldn't be surprised if we average out at about a 3. The first lesson learned from our digital campus is driving human value with human-driven value. It sounds so simple and so complicated all at once. Let's unpack what that means. When we started the rollout, we didn't just start by saying, okay, everyone get on board, we're using Slack now, here it is. It was really important for us to understand the unique value proposition for the community. Not just how they would use it, but why. Why would it be used? How will this actually enhance people's everyday life? And so through a collaborative process, actually with stakeholders across ASU, first week on the job at ASU, mind you, when I started here last year, Warwick was leading a tiger team, and we'll get to what exactly that means here in a moment. And we all got together, this cross section of the university, and connected and talked about what the unique value proposition was for the use of Slack at ASU. And this is what we arrived at. Modernization, for reduction, for example, this is all about how Slack is an all-encompassing application. Warwick mentioned all those app integrations. Well, when people are like, well, I'm already on email or I'm already using Google Drive, well, that's great because all those tools that people use in their daily lives plug in with Slack. So really, people are now just going to one place, and that's Slack, this rich digital campus as the option. Just in terms of coming up with this unique value proposition, we held some visioning sessions, and we invited people, instructional designers, faculty, students, to kind of share their own unique value proposition. And you see that reflected here in our own woven together unique value proposition. Next, Warwick, take us to the next app.
So your organization has Slack, right? Now what do you do? And you know, our second lesson learned is other than just creating a value proposition, that this is a valuable thing that's going to change how people work and offer value to them. But now you need a team to actually work on adoption and the disruption that is going to cause in people's day-to-day work life. And so we created what we called a Tiger Team. Now, Tiger Teams became famous when NASA's Apollo 13, you know, the lunar lander, I think it was their service module exploded, and the team kind of worked on that and got together, and the engineers got together and made a solution. And I think they got the Presidential Medal of Freedom for that. And so that's where Tiger Teams really became famous. But in today's you know, world of Tiger Teams, it's a popular and effective team structure for organizing you know, a group that's focused, a group of experts that are focused on managing technical deployments and solving complex issues. So this team is representative of not just University Technology Office, it's representative of our online communities, it's representative of faculty, it's representative of staff, because we wanted everyone within the enterprise to use it. It's also representative of our Slack partners. And I know Allie's on this call as well and on this session, and she was a big part of the Tiger Team and the success of you know, getting us to work effectively. We together as a team, we agreed on an approach. There were 4 things we needed to accomplish. The first was migrate current Slack workspaces that into the enterprise Slack grid. So there may have been colleges or departments that had their own Slack versions, and we now need to migrate that space over. We needed to design and develop the Slack grid for the enterprise and make some decisions and owners and cross channels and defaults and workspaces and build that out. And then we needed to establish a maintenance plan. Who's going to support and maintain, and what are the guidelines for students, faculty, and staff using this? Are students going to be able to Slack a faculty member at 2 a.m. in the morning and expect an answer back? And so we needed to provide guidance for that. And then lastly, implementing organizational change management. How are we going to communicate, train, adopt? And we'll get into the details of that. And we really took an approach that was more of an agile, but also a product mindset. And so on the next slide there, I just want to express that the team itself we were highly willing to pivot on new information. So, we had customer problems that they may not have even thought they had regarding collaboration or automation of workflows that could be solved within Slack. And that's part of building the differentiation, the value proposition. But then we were going to implement per different departments and per different colleges. And we were going to also iterate on the tool by building some tool sets available to our users. But as we went, we wanted to be transparent of our progress and our non-progress, but also pivot when needed. If we learned something that, hey, this isn't working, we're going to change it. And the design plan itself for most of the work was following what is known as the AdCar model. On the next slide there, Sam, the idea that if you build it, they will come, it's not true, right? It has never worked. So we as a Tiger team had to come up with awareness campaigns, build the desire, because there were some that did not want to use this. They felt it as additive. I have to watch my emails all day. Now I have to watch Slack. And we had to build the desire and demonstrate that this is reductive, right? And then the knowledge and the ability and the reinforcement, and how do we get teams to do that? We followed a template model for AdCar activities that really kind of just built around, what were we going to do as a Tiger team on awareness? How will we raise awareness? We were asking ourselves these questions and building out tasks or deliverables that we would create throughout this entire project. So awareness, there are comm kits that Sam's going to talk about. Desire, the value proposition. Knowledge was all about training and how we build that training. Ability, we wanted to not just train, but we wanted to share success stories. How have others creatively used it? We knew we were going to put this out to the community, but it was going to be used differently than we thought it may have been used. And then reinforcement. So Slack channels, co-convening users, community support, town halls. These were all things that we utilize, and we'll talk more further about. But at its essence was training and building that knowledge that was more of a pull rather than a push. So on the next slide, we kind of show our training mechanisms. We had different trainings for different use cases, right? So you can see here, there's some personas of faculty members that are using the tool perhaps a little differently, right? And we wanted to show and train faculty, what is the grid, what are workspaces, what are channels, what are these things in the tool to help generate a pull. So we had early adopters. On the previous session, at the flagpole session, you saw and heard from Matt Sofa. He was one of the early adopters already using it. And we wanted to utilize those as Slack advocates within our faculty, provide the online resources, and get everyone trained. So this was a big piece of our approach, and we could not do it alone. You cannot do this in a vacuum. It has to be brought out. And once you get those early adopters and all those people excited, you got to pull in and bring in those troops, right? Now you've got a team. And so connecting with our stakeholders was a big piece of the success of implementation. And we connected in many different ways. Surveys, focus groups. I remember the many different focus groups. We sat down and we heard the complaints. We heard the things they were using it for successfully for. We did interviews. Sam's team did a lot of interviews of all different stakeholders, working groups. So, hey, not just the Tiger team, but also some working groups within students and faculty that were early adopters. Marketing communications, Sam, her wonderful work and her team, you'll see some of these and you'll be razzled and dazzled, and you'll get to use them yourselves. Informal feedback, of course, exploratory, like what could we do? What do we want Slack to do? And you'll see some of the things we came up with on that later in this session. And then design thinking and culminating into what we called Slack partners and Slack champions. So Slack partners were within ASU units and departments. They were formal teams, and they had a built-in audience that we could send communications to. Slack champions were members of the community, actual individuals that were passionate about Slack. They wanted it for their teams. And you'll notice with Slack, it's not really useful if you're in it alone. You need your team in there. So we really needed to rally the troops across ASU. Which brings us to what is our strategy towards that, which Sam is going to talk about.
Thank you so much, Warwick. So yeah, having a living strategy is extremely important. This Tiger team didn't get together and say, we're building a playbook and that's it, it's done. People have adopted Slack, let's get out of the way. We very much were in draft mode the whole time. You can see on the slides, and actually the slide before, I just wanted to call your attention to really quickly, just to go backwards for a second. I intentionally brought this slide in from an early slide deck that we had made about a year ago when we were going through each of these items and thinking very intentionally who we had and hadn't included yet to make sure that we could include them. So you'll see under, for example, exploratory playgrounds and sandboxes, there's an intentional note, need students, let's not move forward until we have student voice. So when building a playbook for rolling Slack out at your institution, think in draft mode. We built ours in Google Docs for that reason. We had so many people across the university on this Tiger team reviewing and iterating and adding questions and comments. And we did this by design, and even to this day, this document continues to be updated regularly. What we also did was we value transparency. Slack is a tool that we see expanding transparency around productivity, around learning. And so it's always been a mission of ours to take what we're learning and make it available for all, and also for our community to kind of see what our intention here with providing this enterprise tool is for them. And so on the UTO Slack website, you'll actually see a slide deck representation of our entire playbook from start to finish. Next, it's about building an ecosystem of supporting resources. So the playbook, when we're building the playbook, we talked about things like what types of resources will be needed to build awareness of Slack and what it can do and the unique value proposition, but also bolster people's desire to use it. Well, again, you can't necessarily give people a fishing rod and say, okay, go for it. As the expression goes, you got to teach them how to fish. But at the same time, in a digital campus, you're not that's 24/7. You're not necessarily up 24/7. So you have to create a wealth of resources that are available to people 24/7. So as an example, if you head to that link that we've been sharing, it links out to really a treasure trove of resources. Everything from a Slack 101 document to communication kits, to information about our unique value proposition. And I'll be sharing a little bit more about this in the presentation, but just recently we've updated almost all of our educational materials about ASU's digital campus, and we've openly licensed them with a Creative Commons license so that they can be accessible, adaptable, and shareable to all. So as we learn, we're updating not just the ASU community, but the global education community to learn alongside us. Warwick teased these communication kits. So when we were rolling this out, this was really a new behavior we were influencing across campus. And when I say influence, back to Warwick's point about generating pull rather than pushing change, it has to be something that people see value in and that they want to do. And so how are you doing that? Well, by giving them the tools, right? By giving them not just the fishing pole, but the instruction manual, the bait, the hook, the everything. So in our communications kits, which we created different ones for staff, for faculty, and students, we were able to, using our champions and our partner network, distribute them across the whole of the university. They included a wealth of information, everything from boilerplate blurbs. So say you just need a quick paragraph to explain what Slack is and why we're using it, because you just have 3 seconds or a newsletter to squeeze something in. We had a boilerplate blurb for you. That lovely Slack 101 document that had quick definitions about threading versus starring and some quick best practices were included in the kit. We made some fun how-to GIFs, just a quick second take on how to star something, how to thread something, how to create a new channel. These may be things that Slack users who rated themselves a 3 and above may take for granted that, that Slack noobs, don't know how to do yet, that could really open their eyes to whole new worlds. From our visioning sessions, where we were able to sit down with faculty, staff, and students, we're able to gather testimonials and how people were actually using it and how it was enriching whatever context that they were in, and those were included. We had social media sample posts and GIFs as well, especially for those units or those organizations like ASU Online, where they're catering very heavily and directly to students. Sample news stories and blog post feature for something longer form that could be thrown up on a website. Sample email and newsletter text. Sample experience activities, because if we're encouraging stakeholder inclusion and saying, well, let's have some visioning sessions before rolling something out, we want schools and colleges or other units at ASU to be able to host similar visioning sessions with their own constituency. We had sample web banners, and then finally sample slide decks like this one, where if someone wanted to present live, they absolutely could. Next, of course, because this is all about the digital campus and learners first, it's about making it for students and by students. Warwick, if you want to give a little bit more of insight on that tip.
Yeah, so I'll give some insights, and I'm seeing questions regarding the resources. Just as Sam said, part of our, opening up those licenses on, they are open. We'll get those open to everybody and get those shared out. So look on the Slack channels for Learning Human. But designing for scale for students, by students is important, right? So ensuring that students join on demand. Faculty and staff are automatically subscribed to ASU Community Workspace, but we wanted students to join on demand. Again, the pull rather than the push. Instructors were able to choose through an integration with Canvas and Slack through our course enrollment manager of whether they wanted a Slack channel as part of their course. And so once they selected that, when they were building a course within Canvas, one was created for them and for their use in the class. And anyone enrolled, any student enrolled into that course would have access to that, that Slack workspace and channel. And then we needed to migrate everything to the grid. This was, again, for designing for scale. Again, the biggest piece of this is the deepest relationships, the deepest interactions are organic. And we really want to generate pull and build organic growth in the community engagement rather than push, you will use this. So moving on to, kind of what you all want to say, creating or see is creating that pull. I wanted to give you an example of how Ed Plus and UTO partnered. We partnered with a vendor, Robots and Pencils, to help us build a bot that was for our ASU online coaching staff, our success coaches. And so this was a bot that would, when a student, an online student, is assigned a success coach, the bot would actually welcome and introduce that success coach to that student. And if there was ever a change of that success coach, or if that success coach, heaven forbid, wanted to go on vacation, the student would be notified of who their contact is via a bot. So there's no person actually engaging with these students within Slack. It's this bot, but you can see on that use case there, it feels and it looks and the communication is very personable. And once that student starts engaging with that success coach, the success coach will get those notifications and start engaging asynchronously or synchronously to build that relationship. So the bot was something that really helped them develop that relationship. And we have many different online communities and Slack channels and purposes that are student-centric, and even staff-monitored channels. So on the next slide are some examples. We've built military communities. We've built communities that are based on scholarships. Sun Devils Connect, so where all online students can connect with one another. Student to parent clubs. Sam, I apologize. Yeah, this is on the next slide there. And then, just recently we built out Devil to Devil, where our students can engage with one another. And then our first year success coaching was a big part of this as well, where they were engaging with first year students and they began using Slack to engage with their students, whereas before it was just by phone or email, and the students weren't necessarily showing up to appointments, but if they did, they were engaged. So how did we get engagement when they weren't really engaging via phone or email? And Slack has been a big help. Of course, COVID-19 really pushed them over the edge to move everyone over to Slack in that. So wonderful work from our student coaches and the first year student success coaching staff. But these are just examples of how you can automate some of the work. So think about Workday, what you can do to automate that. Within our staff monitor channels within UTO, we automate a lot with Jira, with ServiceNow. So tickets are actually shown within Slack. And just as an example, if we have an incident that is a P0, like it's a high incident, it will create a Slack channel within Slack. And everyone that is associated with those teams that are associated with the ticket are assigned into that Slack channel automatically, and we can begin to collaborate immediately on that. And then, we also have some wonderful topic areas like ASU Women in Tech. And this is area for people to, I'll let actually Sam talk about this more, but it's all about collaboration of communities that want to get together.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Warwick. So I mentioned that I'm relatively new to ASU, about 1 year in, although I guess that's like in ASU land, that's actually like 7 years probably, we'll say. But one of the first things I did was wanting to start a channel with finding people like me who are interested in technology. So I just opened up an ASU Women in Tech channel. Added a few colleagues, hope that there might be interest, made it public and publicly accessible across all of across our entire community. So that's findable and searchable in all workspaces. And actually, I probably should update this slide because now I think we have close to 400 in that channel. And it's been really great for connecting people in all sorts of roles from everywhere across ASU, from brand new students, as you can see here on the screen, to veteran tenured professors. It's just been an awesome exchange and opportunity. This next tip is all about, again, more about the generating pull rather than pushing change, is to keep your communities focused and don't force the chemistry, right? Sometimes a channel is created and it just doesn't get utilized. Maybe it had the best of intentions, and Slack has kind of a natural way of weeding out what you need and what you don't. And I love getting reminders from the bot that tell me which of my channels maybe I'm not using as much, and do I want to leave them, or should they be archived? And those little nudges are so great because they actually force me to be a more productive human being and to really gain an understanding of where I need to be most, in my day. Slack really has been optimal for these, I would say, 4 areas. Learning, of course, versus random channel creation. So Warwick, if you want to speak to that one a little bit, I know you sort of had some really great context on why to create something for an explicit learning context versus just creating something randomly.
Yeah, I mean, this always comes up, like who gets workspaces, who gets channels, right? And what are the purpose for them as well? And I see, Jason, you're even asking that question in the chat. It is relevant. I think we want to sit down and talk to, and help design, and we did with many different departments, and help design, how do you intend to use this, right? And the ubiquitous use of a channel across different service areas, right? So you can share channels across different workspaces. So it is ubiquitous for a student. And we have many channels like that. But there was a lot of discussion for areas that said, well, we want our own workspace. Well, then you're going to multiple different workspaces, or we're having to create multiple different shared channels across multiple different workspaces. So really having individuals think about, what is it you're trying to create? What is it you're trying to do? Having a workspace for every class is redundant, right? So when we sit down with WP Carey, or we sit down with Ira Fulton, or any of the colleges, and really asking, can you have all of your courses within the one workspace that is yours, and also all the engagement workspaces that you want, that helps with learning, right? But then, we wanted some organic use of Slack as well. So we do have, as Sam says, a team that monitors use of Slack, and where channels are kind of dying out, no one's actually using, and we'll archive those channels. But there are channels that users can create, even students can create, that they can co-convene, and it's about learning. I know that as a student myself, my team of students that we're learning with each other, we will create channels for ourselves based on the projects that were assigned, or the course material that were assigned, and we can collaborate within that space and go back into the course material itself. So it is for learning, but it's also maybe a random channel that dies out as soon as the project is done. But it is natural for the community to build in that way. And the next slide kind of has a snapshot of some of the use cases. So that we did really try to think of many different use cases, but there were use cases we didn't even think of, like the success coaches. We didn't necessarily think of that, but online learning needed that for themselves. But you can definitely read these slides, but the idea is that each different department, whether it's for learning, whether it's for conferences or a community partnership, universities are diverse, and it's a struggle sometimes to design a platform for use across a community within a university. The next slide kind of goes into the details of some of the personas we went after. We went into some detail of some personas, right, that we want to chase. So we have students, we may have experienced students, right? But we also may have students that they've never really touched technology, right? They don't have digital fluency per se. Same with faculty, but they may be wanting to use it for different things, maybe research, maybe helping with publication of their papers, whereas others really want it to engage with students. And then of course, staff. Some staff may hate the idea. Other staff may say, hey, I've been working with my team trying to get them into this Slack, and no one's wanting to get in there, right? These were kind of the personas we created to help us design. So you're going to see some of the design on the next pages for our instructors and departments, and Sam's going to speak to that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Warwick. And something that I meant to speak to on an earlier slide too was around targeted marketing. So as we share with you kind of some of these examples, something to keep in mind, especially if you're coming from a huge university like ASU, or just a huge organization in general, you may already know or be aware of how hard it is to get the word out about something, whether it's an event, even some sort of policy change, right? Like, how are you making sure you're hitting the right people we've actually, being able to head up the creative and comms team at the University Technology Office, we've really focused and leaned into Slack pretty heavily for our own targeted marketing. We've identified and even created key channels of stakeholders and people. One example is Slack champions. If we need to get information out about Slack, Slack champions are the people who are wildly enthusiastic about it and are going to help us spread the word. And so now we've been able to do things like promote events, promote things like information security training, and make sure we're hitting the right people in a more organic way than a one-way communication like an email that's not really inviting an exchange or questions necessarily.
And people love those channels too, because people help each other, and that takes away from the maintenance and operations and support needed. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So here's one example from a really fantastically creative professor at ASU. Dr. Malhays from our School of Computing Informatics and Decision Systems Engineering is not only using it for purposes of communications, she's using it for really to have like really careful and intentional discussions with their team, and also invite feedback about how things are going so that she can adjust things in real time. At Watts College of Public Service and Community Solutions, they've really implemented it in a unique way. Responses to certain questions here, as you can see, are graded as they would be in a discussion board model. But their director of education innovation has noted that the engagement is higher in Slack. So it's really aided all the non-graded aspects. W.P. Carey School of Business. We learned a lot from Matt Sofa in our keynote around the flagpole earlier today. But we know, and professors also like Phil Simon are creating channels where students are encouraged to respond to polls, submit their own photos during class. So I know this is asynchronized swimming, but Slack is being used synchronously during the live learning experience as well, which is really exciting. There are global exchanges taking place. Those of you who are here today for Learning Human hopefully have already experienced our global change-making community on Slack. So in 2019, at our very first, or our second actually, Shaping EDU unconference, we decided to create a Shaping EDU workspace in Slack where people from all different universities, schools, institutions, organizations around the world could connect live with each other ahead of the unconference and during the unconference. And then we leveraged those channels after this what was a face-to-face event to keep the conversations, not just the conversations going, but project collaborations. So you could see there's an open journal planning channel. There's an innovating artificial intelligence applications channel. Those things actually became projects where we had community members from various universities and organizations working together to bring things to life. Our volunteer leaders, our mayors, have their own private channel where exchanges are happening. And now you can see the evolution for Learning Human. We've opened up this workspace to an even wider group of people. And while it's been a great experience to be able to get communications out and hear how things are going for people at Learning Human, we really hope and intend it to be used as a year-round space for idea and knowledge exchange. All right.
We don't have much time left, so I won't spend too much time on this, but when you talk about channel proliferation, it is important to organize your grid in the importance of name calling. And so we just have an example. I won't spend too much time on it, but from an internal team, a department, right? And some of the channels there, you can see that the prefix is all UTO dash, right? And anything external that's ASU wide is ASU dash. So naming conventions are important to organize your grid space. Understanding what channels are locked and what channels are shared or open, that's important as well. And which channels are shared across workspaces. And you know, as a user, you get used to these things, that I can see ASU-wide channels that are shared across my different workspaces, and it makes sense because it has that prefix of ASU dash. But you know, just looking at this, you can get an idea of some of the channels that have been created in different workspaces. And Sam's going to talk about being, you know, a better marketer, right?
Yeah, becoming a meta marketer. So I just wanted to double click on the point I made earlier about targeted marketing because it always helps to show rather than tell. So names redacted except for mine, of course. But we held a Partner to Protect unconference last year. We like to do unconferences, as you can tell, at the University Technology Office. But what happens when you get a group of cybersecurity professionals from across Arizona into a single channel? Well, greatness, apparently. So from an event to community, we're able to really scaffold this notion of one-off events and turn them into thriving communities of practice and communities of interest. And something to think about is whether to make something open or whether to make something public, because it's going to be really key for you to think about how easy you want it to be for people to discover your channel and add other people in. Here's another quick example. At UTO, we have a UTO announcements channel. What's interesting to note is that UTO has over 500 employees, student workers, etc., but there are close to 1,000 people in this channel. That's because we've invited in key partners and stakeholders to be in on our announcements. We feel that transparency and openness is really important, and when we have something to share, we want everyone to be able, we want everyone relevant, or who it's relevant for, to be able to get it. So here's just an example of what actually now is daily or twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day when it's a busy cycle. An example of an announcement that goes out to all staff, all student workers, and kind of all key stakeholders and partners of UTO. Finally, since we're getting to the end, share stories along the way. As our storytelling person here for UTO, leading the charge for storytelling.
Best storyteller.
Well, we will see. I mean, I certainly try. I think it's really important. You have your stats, right, which are a great benchmark. How many users, how many daily messages are being sent. I see questions in the chat about how many workspaces. Those are all great benchmarkers to see how your community is organically growing. But if you're not allowing and enabling the sharing of stories along the way, then it's really hard to really see tangibly the progress that's unfolding. So really excited. Our own UTO Slack resource has actually now had, actually I need to update this slide. I think it's well on its way to 50,000 visits since our relaunch on August 1st of last year with the Playbook. And this is without it being widely publicized at all until today. We've done faculty interviews and a feature story for the UTO newsroom in partnership with Ed+. We've got Slack produced and Deloitte produced case studies and more. And also, because storytelling is so important and spreading the news and sharing those stories and those educational resources is really important, I just want to plug again that many of our resources, not all, but many, have Creative Commons licenses on them. This is to make it as easy as possible for you to share and also to adapt. So if you see something on the site and you don't have access to it yet and you'd like to have access for whatever reason, you know where to find us now, just let us know. We're constantly adding more resources and more Creative Commons licenses. And in fact, I mentioned at the onset of this presentation that for Back to Campus Fall 2020, we have a new modality called ASU Sync. And ASU Sync leverages Zoom, of course, for these live experiences. But it also is going to thrive based on compelling uses of Slack. There's an ASU Sync website that has great informational resources, particularly for faculty around usage of synchronous teaching and learning tools. And many of those are now openly licensed as well. So I invite you to check those out and share. In case you missed it though, just kind of a a snapshot, the full story, the full picture of what we discussed here today, just to jog your memory as we sort of get into the question portion of our session. We talked about driving, we started by talking about driving human value and about the unique value proposition. And then we ended with human impact and sharing stories along the way. So I want to thank you all for your time today. I know we have just a few minutes left. Here's how to reach us on email if you'd like access to something or you have more questions. Then, of course, we hope you're enjoying the Shaping EDU Learning Human Slack workspace. Here's how to ping us on Slack.
Yeah, ping us on Slack.
We love it.
Slack actually reduced my emails, so ping me on Slack.
Yeah, priority on that as well. And you'll have a better chance of me responding even quicker if you use one of my 3 favorite emojis: the cat eating popcorn, the space alien, and the unicorn. Questions?
Emotional outbursts.
Well, let me ask a question of you then. Okay, we just rolled through 10 tips pretty quickly, and we went to some interesting places, took some detours. Those of you who rated yourselves 1 through 5, and even those of you who came a little later and didn't have a chance to, at the end of this presentation, and you can use decimal points, that's okay, rate yourself between 1 and a 5. 1 being the newbiest of new Slack users, and 5 being the most advanced of Slack users. How are you feeling today? Okay, I'm seeing some decimals, so that leads me to believe there are at least some half-point upticks.
Some movement.
Okay, well, I'd also like to plug Faculty Voice. Dr. Melhays will be presenting at the next breakout session on some of her own use cases of Slack, and you're not going to want to miss that one. So be sure to check the Learning Human website, the asynchronized swimming page, to click to join your session in Zoom, Verbella, or ASU Live.
Yes, thank you all. And do not forget the concert tonight. It's going to be great.
All right, see you on Slack. Thank you.